Alejandro Aravena, who is an extraordinary person I have known from his work in Santiago for a number of years, and he's going to talk about housing as an investment and not a social expense. So, Alejandro, over to you.
I'm here as part of a group of architects and engineers called Elemental. We call ourselves a do tank. We work in the city using it as a source of equality, as a shortcut towards equality, and as a powerful vehicle to create wealth, doing projects of infrastructure, public space, services, and housing. Today's presentation is about housing. 2 points regarding housing. The first one, since we have small amount of money, instead of doing a small house, we do half of a good house. Second point, we try to design it as opposed to being cars, making them gain value over time, so treating housing as investment, no social expense. If you have a house and you have scarce resources, the tendency is to make it smaller and eventually far away where land tends to cost nothing. So our point is that we're trying to change that instead of doing a small house, do half of a good house. The key question when you have money for just half of the house is, which half do you do? We try to do the half that a half family will never be able to achieve on its own. We have identified 5 design conditions: location, urban layout, position of unit within the lot, structure for final size, not the initial size, and middle income DNA that a family very rarely and very difficultly is going to be able to do on its own at the very beginning. Regarding the second point, we have identified 5 design parameters that can make a house gain value over time, and those 5 design conditions are pretty much the same that are the half that a family will never be able to achieve on its own. We work accepting the framework of housing policy existing in Chile. Very quickly, it's a property-oriented policy, a subsidy to the demand, and we have to work with a subsidy of $7,500 with which you have to pay for the land, do the infrastructure, and build the houses. This is a new policy. We began working in 2001 when this policy was just starting, so the market has not tested any solution for this new niche yet. And this $7,500 consists in a direct subsidy of the government to a family of $7,000, more or less, $300 of family saving, private saving of the family, no debt. The deal is that the poor it's not that they do not have an income, they do not have a regular income. That's why a social housing policy has to be focused on that type of income, and it's about them to complete the house then afterwards over time. Within that policy, we thought we had a point. We worked for 2 years at Harvard and the Universidad Católica, and we thought we have a point, and to prove our point, we had to build, using the same rules everybody else in the market was using. The challenge, our first project back in 2003, was asked by the government, can you settle 100 families that for 30 years have lived illegally in the center of the city, Iquique, instead of displacing them to the periphery, using the $7,000 subsidy, which in the best of the cases can pay for 30 square meters, and locate all these 100 families in the lot that they're using, which is half an hectare, 5,000 square meters? Even though this was a very bad neighborhood, very difficult problems with drug dealing and very bad environmental conditions, the city around this poor community was highly desirable to be maintained. Jobs, transportation, health, education. And actually the market saw that all that concentration of opportunities made sense, so the price of the land, and this was the problem, was 3 times more what social housing can normally afford. This PowerPoint is very much the same we showed to the families. If they were expecting a house, only 30 families could be located, but then this isolated type of unit cannot guarantee the quality of the urban layout in the future, and we are talking about 50% of the environment self-built. Value of the property, very sure, is going to go down very quickly, as we have a lot of evidence that happened in Chile in the last decades. We test another type. If the row houses, 60 families could be allocated, still not enough. The problem is that when 3-meter wide houses, whenever you want to expand, you have to go through other rooms or block bathrooms and kitchens. So what you get is overcrowding. This wasn't an alternative either. Building height. We could accommodate 100 families. The problem, they threatened us to go to a hunger strike if we even dare to offer this as a solution. The reason, they cannot expand. Given 30 square meters, the question of expansion was a must. Conclusion, we have a problem. What to do? Reframe the question. Instead of thinking of the best possible $7,500 unit and multiplied it 100 times, we ask ourselves, what is the best $750,000 building that we can do, and ask this building for conditions. It has to accommodate 100 families, and it has to allow expansion. The problem with the building is that it blocks expansion. That's true, except on the ground and the last floor. So what we did was a building that had only the ground at the last floor. We displaced it in such a way within the law that it could cover at least 50% of the urban front and guarantee at least something of the quality of that urban neighborhood in the future, and left some voids where we expected families could grow, eventually the day that we were giving the houses in the afternoon. We got into a process of participation, understanding participation, first of all, as information and communication of constraints. My partner, a transport engineer, explaining to the families that we had only one idea to solve the equation. Actually, it took them 3 seconds to accept the proposal because we didn't invent anything. They developed a house on the ground floor and an apartment on top that was rented to a second generation of illegal tenants. The question is that's how they achieved density. The question is that they didn't manage to organize all the 5 other design conditions that we had identified at the beginning. So we organized, with the participation of the community, in smaller groups where social achievements can be more easily achieved, about 20 families, a very specific legal structure of condominium of families, one entrance asked by them due to the problems of security that they had in the past. Houses on the ground floor, duplex apartments on top, no common spaces, enough evidence that common shared spaces, elevated sidewalks, stairs on top cannot be maintained, and that influences the value of the property. So direct access of each property to the ground floor. Expansions in the voids. We use every possible tool to communicate these ideas in workshop with families. Now we have a protocol of 10 meetings that we have been following in the projects afterwards. We were running workshops where we asked families to draw, the chief of the family to draw or write to verify if we were on the same page regarding facades or courtyards or the growth, always in the last place one would like. Courtyards. And this is how families thought their project was going to be about. We were competing against this. This is what you can do with $7,000 in Chile, in the periphery, 2 hours away from where they were in the center of the city. And we had to prove that with design, we could do this. Design, as you see, is pretty much the same box. It's not there, the architecture. One box on the ground floor, then another vertical box on top. But the strategic use of design allowed the families to keep their jobs and complete their houses very quickly afterwards. The cost of the first half, $7,000. The cost of the next 36 square meters, in average, $1,000. They didn't have to perform any difficult operation, like structure, for example. The cost of this unit today, $20,000. The value, sorry. This is what we were giving. As you see, no pavements, no finishing. So the equation is high density without overcrowding with possibility of expansion. We test this throughout Chile in different situations. The cost of this unit is a new policy, $10,000. Last week, this lady came. She went to the bank to ask for a loan. The bank valued the property in $15,000 5 months afterwards. And we have just started our first project outside Chile, in Mexico, in Monterrey. So the question is, can we do this quickly and big? Can we achieve scale and speed? For doing that, two things. Prefabricated systems. When you're doing just half of the house, you can prefabricate without bad conscience. Prefabrication has always been criticized for its incapacity to match preferences and individualities and family structures and diversity and so on and so forth. And you go against the system if you try to go away from monotony. When you do half of the house, you can be monotonous all the way, because actually, only if you're very monotonous, you might frame random self-interventions and actually transform deterioration into a process of customization. So that's about speed. And for scale, we are trying to make our group of architects and engineers grow, but of course we're not going to be able to work in all the projects. So we've developed an online catalog, 2 elevated to 5 alternative. 5 questions: rain, no rain, flat side, sloped side, 2 properties, 1 property. You choose the conditions of your own site and answer yourself the first approach to housing. And all this can be visited at elementalchile.cl. Thank you very much.